We have some breaking news, a blow to illiberal democracies throughout Europe. And here at home, Viktor Orbán defeated Sunday night in Hungary's parliamentary elections. Orbán describing his party's defeat as, quote, clear and painful. Unlike Trump, he accepts the will of the people. He promised to continue serving Hungary as an opposition leader. This is a tremendous blow to Donald Trump, who campaigned actively for Orbán, as did our Secretary of State, Marco Rubio. Orbán is the blueprint for authoritarian rule here in the United States. Steve Bannon studied him. Tucker Carlson studied him. Donald Trump used the Viktor Orbán playbook. Vice President J.D. Vance was in Budapest before he flew to Pakistan and failed to negotiate a peace deal. Last week, he spoke before a crowd of 5,000 Orbán supporters, and he dialed in to Donald Trump, and Trump told Orbán's supporters, get out there and vote. He's made your country great. No, he hasn't. No, he hasn't. Only people who are in the party are benefiting or were benefiting from Orbán's 16 years of authoritarian rule under Viktor Orbán coming to an end. Bad economy. This is a man like Trump who declared war on Muslims, immigrants, and the LGBTQ community. He othered. That's how he held power, through corruption and by othering marginalized communities. He was defeated Sunday by an apostate, a member of Orbán's own party who broke away 2 years ago, Peter Magyar. Magyar reportedly broke with Orbán after Orbán covered up a child sex abuse scandal 2 years ago, and it was a landslide Sunday night. There were, I guess you could call it gerrymandering. He had to win big in order to beat the systemic changes that Viktor Orbán put into elections and, of course, state-owned media. Orbán controlled the media, but it was a landslide. Now, Peter Magyar is center-right. He used to be part of Orbán's party, so it's not like he's some great Bernie Sanders, but he's better than Viktor Orbán. We have early partial results coming in. Before I started, we had about 58% of the precincts counted. It shows the Tisza Party at about 53% of the vote, and Viktor Orbán's Fidesz party at about 38.8%. That is a landslide victory, and that's what Peter Magyar needed his Tisza Party to get in order to beat Orbán. His party looks like it's going to get a 2/3 majority in the parliament. This is what the BBC and Reuters is reporting, 137 seats in a 199-seat parliament. So that's enough to amend the Constitution, which they've been doing a lot since Viktor Orbán became prime minister. Voter turnout was historic. 77% of eligible voters had already voted by 6:30 p.m. It was a record. It was the biggest turnout since Hungary stopped being part of the Warsaw Pact, ever since the fall of the Soviet Union, and Hungary began having free and fair elections. Largest turnout ever. Well, it's being celebrated throughout Europe. Ursula von der Leyen, Emmanuel Macron, and Pedro Sanchez. Pedro Sanchez is the socialist prime minister of Spain. They celebrated the election results, calling it a massive win for European values and unity. He was a problem. Hungarian Prime Minister Viktor Orbán, not just corrupt, not just authoritarian, not just persecuting marginalized communities. He was almost kicked out of the EU for his lack of support for Ukraine. He is an ally of Putin's, and there are reports that Putin helped fund his elections over the years. So now he has conceded defeat. That's it, 16 years gone, done, finished for the time being. These people have a way of coming back. And as they are saying now, this deprives Vladimir Putin, his only ally within the European Union. There are far-right extremists like Giorgia Meloni in Italy, but even she will not support Vladimir Putin. The Alternative for Germany party is both they're apologists for Hitler and Putin, but even the Alternative for Germany party, which came in second in last year's German parliamentary elections, could not bring themselves to go after Putin. They believe the invasion of Ukraine was self-inflicted, but this is big news for Trump. It's you have a Europe that has been taken over by right-wing parties, and maybe the pendulum is beginning to swing back. UK Prime Minister Keir Starmer, Labour, called Magyar's victory a historic moment for European democracy. Well, yeah, I have more on this, but I don't think there's other stuff going on. This is the Mop-Up. I'm David Feldman in New York City. Thank you for finding me. Well, like the war in Iran, Saturday's negotiations to end the fighting of that war was doomed from the start. Did I say Friday's negotiations? Saturday's negotiations to end the fighting was doomed from the start. Now, Trump is desperate. He's too far gone in the head to admit to himself or the world that he's just out of control, can't control the situation. Deep down in that psyche of his, there's desperation. And part of that desperation is never allowing J.D. Vance to come home with a deal. They don't want, or at least Trump doesn't want, J.D. Vance looking presidential or being able to say to Donald Trump, I told you this was a bad idea. I told you a year ago bombing Yemen was a bad idea. Look, man, I served in Iraq. We don't want to send our troops back to the Middle East. Trump didn't listen to him. He only listens to Netanyahu, Putin, and anyone who tells him what he wants to hear, like Pete Hegseth, the equally demented racist, our Secretary of Defense, white Christian nationalist, Pete Hegseth. He wanted this war. Only two people in the White House wanted this war, Pete Hegseth and Donald Trump. Well, it should come as no surprise that after a 21-hour marathon session of negotiations, Vice President J.D. Vance stood in front of reporters in Pakistan to announce we have not reached an agreement. He said, the simple fact is we need to see an affirmative commitment that they, the Iranians, will not see a nuclear weapon. We haven't seen that yet, unquote. Trump and Hegseth killed the negotiations based on the same false premise that Iran refuses to give up its nuclear weapons program. Iran gave it up in 2003. Yes, Iran enriches its uranium up to 65%, but that's only as a deterrent to keep Israel and the United States from attacking them. It's the same reason Saddam Hussein pretended to have weapons of mass destruction. He didn't want to be invaded by the United States. I don't know if you know this, but sometimes we invade countries. So by playing fast and loose with the weapons inspectors and enriching their uranium up to 65%, it gave Iran leverage on the world stage, but not the kind of leverage it has now by shutting down Hormuz. So when Trump Or J.D. Vance announces, we have not reached an agreement and we're walking away because we cannot allow Iran to have a nuclear weapon. That's a lie. No surprise, but J.D. Vance and Donald Trump are liars. There are two reasons these talks broke down before they even started. They were doomed before they even began. Trump has two huge problems that he cannot solve, and it's not Iran's phony nuclear weapons program. There are two problems he could not see or refused to see before starting this unnecessary and illegal war. The first, Strait of Hormuz. For reasons I've gone over and will discuss later, there is no military solution to getting Iran to open Hormuz without spilling massive amounts of American blood. And while Trump, Pete Hegseth, Keith Kellogg, who used to be Trump's peace envoy up until January of this year, Lindsey Graham and Congressman Pat Fallone, while they have no problem spilling American blood in Iran, the American people and most of our generals do. So that gives the Iranians what is called asymmetric leverage. So the entire purpose of these talks was to figure out how to open Hormuz. That was the purpose of these talks, at least as far as Trump was concerned, but he knew they held all the cards. Everyone knows Iran holds all the cards. So that's why nobody's bringing up Hormuz. When he walked out of the meeting, J.D. Vance never brought up Hormuz. It was the lie about the nuclear weapons program that doesn't exist because he wouldn't dare bring up Trump's weakness, that he can't open Hormuz. We dropped 13,000 bombs on Iran. We did. That doesn't include what Netanyahu did. We've burned through 25% of our Tomahawk missiles. Israel is rationing its interceptors, and the Persian Gulf is turning to Vladimir Zelensky. Ukraine, for cheap, cost-effective attack drones that can blow Iranian drones and missiles out of the sky. Now, Iran knows this. We know Iran knows this, and Iran knows that we know Iran knows this. Trump is desperate. He claims two U.S. attack destroyers sailed through Hormuz looking for mines. Iran denies that. There's also reporting that Iran left mines in the Strait of Hormuz but doesn't know where they are. From what we understand, those two attack destroyers sailed through Hormuz and they were not attacked by Iran. But who knows what is true? The reality is, however, it would take untold American lives to force Iran to open Hormuz. And the Iranian leadership has shown themselves willing to take on immense pain, more pain than anyone in the United States is willing to take on. Well, there are some rare exceptions, but they want other Americans to take on that pain. Lindsey Graham doesn't want to send his son or daughter into a... Is he married? Does he have kids? I always forget. But he's willing to have other people spill their blood for this. Okay, so that's the first problem that Trump has, Hormuz. And he's not going to admit it. But that is his second problem, Benjamin Netanyahu, who, unlike America, but exactly like the Iranians, Benjamin Netanyahu is willing to endure as much pain as necessary to prolong this war. We know from reporting in the New York Times that the entire White House was against this war except Donald Trump and Pete Hegseth. We know that in mid-February, Benjamin Netanyahu sat in the Situation Room and outlined a military solution to the Iran problem. He said, we decapitate the leadership. And Donald Trump's loins began to tingle. He said, we kill them all. We kill the Ayatollah and all his top leaders, and the regime is toppled. And when he said we kill the Ayatollah, Pete Hegseth also sobered up. He loved that. Killing the Ayatollah? Netanyahu said, you've seen the protests on the streets of Tehran throughout the year. The time is ripe, he said, to give the Iranians a little push, a chance to seize control. And he said, we start bombing and we kill the Ayatollah. In a matter of days, the people will rise up and there will be freedom and democracy in Iran. This despite Netanyahu's own intelligence agency, Mossad, telling him that if protesters try to topple the regime, there will be mass slaughter. But Netanyahu lied to Trump and said, no, they just need a little help. And Trump loves that. You know, killing the Ayatollah, bombing Muslims, so did Hegseth, right? Trump is drunk with power and Hegseth is just drunk. They want to kill Muslims. Everyone else in the White House, everyone in the Situation Room said this is wrong. And by the way, there are reports that Netanyahu sat at the head of the table inside the Situation Room. Now, I don't know if that's true, but, you know, Tucker Carlson, who now calls Donald Trump the Antichrist because of this war, he's been saying Trump's foreign policy has been run by Netanyahu through the Knesset. Doesn't make a move without checking with Netanyahu. Actually, it's Netanyahu and Putin, but Tucker Carlson doesn't hate Putin. But anyway, so everyone else said this was wrong. Vance, Rubio, chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff, Kane, even Tucker Carlson reportedly, at least according to the New York Times, visited the White House in the lead up to the February 28th launch of the bombing campaign. He said, don't do this. But Trump and Hegseth wanted to do this, and they lost the war. At least it's not a forever war. Trump said no more forever wars. Well, 5 weeks, and he lost it. Hormuz remains closed, and the Iranians right now hold all the cards. They will, and this is the second problem, okay? First problem for Trump is Hormuz. The second problem is, what am I going to do about Netanyahu? Because the Iranians have made it clear they will not open Hormuz unless Israel agrees to stop waging war on Hezbollah. Those are the two demands and the two problems Trump has. Now, Hormuz, closing Hormuz is way more powerful than anybody realized. They're going to ask for more from Trump than stop bombing us and stop the bombing of Lebanon. But those are Trump's two initial problems. He cannot open the Strait of Hormuz, and he has to. The world is blaming him, not Iran. And Iran knows that he has to get the Strait of Hormuz open, but it's up to Iran. It's up to Iran. And they're saying Lebanon, Hezbollah, Israel. Iran is saying in no uncertain terms, Donald, you need to get your friend Netanyahu. You got to get your arms around Benjamin Netanyahu and get him to stop bombing Beirut. Stop seizing land south of the Litani River in in Netanyahu's expansionist hopes of a greater Israel. Netanyahu does not want this war to stop. He needs the war. there are corruption trials awaiting him. He's intensified his attacks on Lebanon. He did it minutes after the ceasefire was announced, with right now more than 1 million Lebanese civilians displaced and more than 2,000 dead since fighting resumed on February 28th. The minute the ceasefire was declared, Netanyahu bombed Lebanon. Within 5 minutes, hundreds of civilians were killed and displaced. So maybe Trump didn't quite get this, but Iran is very protective, not just of its paramilitary organization, Hezbollah, in Lebanon. Hezbollah is also a political party, and it's a community aid center inside Lebanon. It's also a paramilitary operation. Iran is very protective of Hezbollah. It created Hezbollah because Iran is very protective of the Shia community inside Lebanon, which is why they joined forces with Hassan Nasrallah in the early 80s and created and funded Hezbollah. If you're Iran right now and you control the biggest maritime choke point in the world, not quite, I think the Bab el-Mandab Strait below the Red Sea, which leads into the Suez Canal. I think the Bab el-Mandab Strait is the biggest maritime choke point in the world. But the Strait of Hormuz, we know how important it is. If you can close it, you hold all the cards. You do. The Strait of Hormuz. So why would you fold? Why would you fold right now if you were Iran? One military analyst said every day Iran keeps Hormuz closed is another day that puts another nail in the coffin of the American empire. So this entire war, as all wars are, built on a lie. And the reason peace talks collapse, what we're being told right now, is a lie. It has nothing to do with Iran's nuclear weapons program. Iran doesn't have one. But that's the boogeyman. Netanyahu uses it. Trump is using it because we know the American people are easily terrified by the thought of the Islamic Republic of Iran having a nuclear weapon. We know some Israelis, probably a majority of Israelis, if not more, are terrified by the thought of Iran getting a nuclear weapon. Well, nobody should have a nuclear weapon, but let's look at the map and let's think about this, okay? So Ralph Nader repeatedly says on the Ralph Nader Radio Hour, which you can download on a podcast, it would be great if Iran doesn't get a nuclear weapon. We don't want them to get a nuclear weapon. But look at the map, look how close everybody is, and realize that 20% of Israel, not counting Gaza, the West Bank, and the Golan Heights, are Palestinians, not Jews, Palestinians, most of whom are Muslims. So Iran drops this nuclear bomb on Israel. That radioactive cloud doesn't differentiate between Jews and Muslims, and it will spread to southern Lebanon, as well as the West Bank, Gaza, and the Golan Heights. A nuclear bomb will kill your own people if you're Iran. Okay? So, while it's not good for Iran to have a nuclear weapon, they're not going to use it. They're going to use it as deterrence, but they're not going to actually drop it, because if they did, we would annihilate Iran, and it's a mountainous country, which means the radioactivity wouldn't spread as far as it would if they dropped one on Israel. But That is the truth, but it requires uncertainty and accepting uncertainty. And most Americans are children. We fear uncertainty. And all you have to do is scare enough Americans and then promise them certainty, and we'll vote for you and support a war. And that's how we end up with feral white Christian nationalists like Pete Hegseth, covered in neo-Nazi tattoos. That's how we end up with him as our defense secretary. He said last week that we're going to go in and take, this was after the ceasefire, he said, we're going in and taking Iran's 970 pounds of uranium. He said, either they will give it to us or we're going to get it. We'll take it. No, you're not. No, you're not. You're not going to find it without a lot of our soldiers ending up dead. You're not taking their enriched uranium. Where does that leave things? Again, this has nothing to do with Iran's non-existent nuclear weapons program. Trump is a liar. And he and Hegseth are too ashamed to admit that they literally broke the planet. They're too ashamed to admit they didn't realize Netanyahu was playing them, that Netanyahu needs a forever war against the Palestinians, Iran, and Lebanon. Trump and Hegseth didn't believe anyone who told them Iran will go nuclear by closing Hormuz. Trump and Hegseth said the Iranians would never, ever shut down 20 to 25% of the world's oil supply, 30% of the world's supply of liquid natural gas, and 30 to 40% of the world's fertilizer. Why did Hegseth and Trump say that? Why were they so convinced that Iran would never shut down the Strait of Hormuz? Well, they're stupid, and they figured if Iran closed the Strait of Hormuz, the entire world would turn on Iran, blaming the Islamic Republic for the collapse of the world economy. Trump and Hegseth, who know better than everybody, were convinced that China, which needs oil from the Persian Gulf, would turn on Iran. They were convinced NATO, all of Europe, countries in the Pacific would send in the world's largest flotilla to bombard Iran into submission. They figured that because they're stupid. They're stupid. Iran has been planning for this since 1979, and they knew exactly what would happen, that the world wouldn't blame Iran for shutting down the Strait of Hormuz. They would blame Trump, and that's exactly what's happening. The world is blaming Trump for all of this. We told you not to go in there. We had a deal in 2015 that Putin was on board, Obama was on board, the UN, and you threw it out. We had a deal. Don't go in there. This is a situation you don't quite understand. No, I'm gonna break the planet. And you have world leaders now, allies of the United States, France, saying, this isn't our war. This is not our war. You've got Italy and Spain saying, you can't use our bases to launch air attacks over Iran. Great Britain is reluctantly doing it, but they don't want any part of this. He was completely played. Trump and Hegseth were completely played by Iran and Benjamin Netanyahu. Had no idea what they were up against with those two, Netanyahu and Iran. So what happens next? Trump cannot control Netanyahu, and he can't force Hormuz militarily to be opened. So, if Trump is smart, and he's not, he would have some kind of back channel negotiations going on right now with Iran. That big show of peace talks in Islamabad on Saturday were not the high-level talks they were presented to be. Islamabad, this was Kabuki. It was in lockdown, like COVID. It looked like COVID, but something worse than COVID had arrived. J.D. Vance, who was negotiating with Iranian Parliament Speaker Mohammad Bagher Ghalibaf. He's the Speaker of the Iranian Parliament. Somewhat influential, but he's not in charge. Maybe he's important. Maybe he can see the top of the food chain from where he sits, but he's not important, because if he were, Netanyahu would have already killed him. We know J.D. Vance is not important. He's a eunuch. He's the vice president. Trump doesn't want him succeeding because Trump is running in 2028. You also had Steve Witkoff and Jared Kushner. Now, they're the peace envoys. They've accomplished absolutely nothing, but they have Trump's ear. He trusts them. But this entire exercise in futility, the peace talks, was for show. We had 10,000 security officials surrounding the hotel. Shops were closed, businesses were closed, people were ordered to stay inside. The Iranian delegation was escorted into Pakistani airspace with Pakistani fighter jets and AWACS, but it was all bluster. Nobody sitting at the table was authorized to do anything. Vance, trying to look important, left saying the breakdown in talks is bad news for Iran. Yeah, he said he loves to, like, they made their choice, bad news for them. We tried. The fact that he feels the need to keep talking tough, the fact that Donald Trump feels the need to keep talking tough, shows how weak they are. If you're swinging massive meat, you don't need to tell anybody. Trump, again on Sunday, was threatening more war crimes. He was saying we're going to attack desalination plants in Iran. The mere act, by the way, of threatening a war crime is a war crime. It's against the law. It's against the Geneva Conventions to threaten to blow up power plants and desalination. So he's already, and forget the 100,000 civilian structures in Iran that were destroyed on purpose by our military, 100,000 civilian buildings destroyed in Iran. These $3 million Tomahawks have cameras on top of them. You mean you really can't tell the difference? We made a mistake. We thought Manab, the girls' school, we thought it was a naval academy. Really? And the camera on top of that $3 to $4 million Tomahawk, you can't see that there are no boats there, you effing liars, you war criminals, you war criminals. Much has been written about Jack and Bobby Kennedy's savvy during the Cuban Missile Crisis. The Russians had planted or were beginning to plant nuclear weapons in Cuba, and this was unacceptable. It was a violation of the Monroe Doctrine. Kennedy said, you can't do it, can't do it. So there was a naval blockade which prevented any Soviet ships from bringing more supplies into Cuba. And for a couple of days, it looked like there would be war nuclear war. It created a little bit of a baby boom. Everybody thought they were going to die, so they all started having unprotected sex. The Kennedy legend is he went eyeball to eyeball with Nikita Khrushchev, and Khrushchev blinked. Well, the truth is far from mythical. That's a nice legend from Camelot. Yes, the Soviets did agree to remove their missiles from Cuba, but only 9 people in Kennedy's immediate orbit knew the absolute truth, which was later confirmed in 1989. The Cuban Missile Crisis was 1962, so I believe we found out 27 years later that before Kennedy could get Khrushchev to blink, Kennedy's brother, Attorney General Robert F. Kennedy, he met secretly with Soviet Ambassador Anatoly Dobrynin. Now, they struck a deal. Kennedy struck a deal with the Russians. The United States military, he said, would agree to remove nuclear-tipped Jupiter missiles pointing towards Russia. They were inside Turkey and Italy. So they were old, by the way, they were old missiles. They were being replaced, I think, by the Polaris missiles, submarine-launched Polaris missiles, which were way more destructive. So we had nuclear-tipped Jupiter missiles pointing at Russia inside Turkey and Italy. Bobby Kennedy said to the Russians, you pull your missiles out of Cuba, in a couple of months, we will secretly pull our nuclear-tipped Jupiter missiles out of Russia, out of Turkey and Italy. And but you got to go first. And the Soviets agreed to this. Nikita Khrushchev terrified the United States, but he wasn't Stalin. There was a lot of bluster, but he was trying to feed his people. He wasn't as bad as Stalin. So they agreed to it. They said, we got bigger problems. So it was a secret. We didn't go eyeball to eyeball with the Russians and they blinked. Our naval blockade and the threat of war isn't what it probably contributed to the missiles being removed from Cuba, but it was this deal where America agreed to pull the Jupiter missiles from Turkey and Italy that allowed Khrushchev to remove the missiles from Cuba. But it was a secret for 1989, 27 years? Yeah, 27 years, because it made America and Kennedy look weak. What are we spending all this money on weapons for if we beat the Russians through diplomacy by removing weapons? Doesn't look good. You're not supposed to win by removing weapons from potential theaters of war. The truth is about Kennedy, he wasn't weak. He came close to dying in the Pacific during World War II. His older brother did die over the English Channel during World War II. John Fitzgerald Kennedy served, and he knew not to trust his generals, especially the hawks in the room, like Air Force General Curtis LeMay, who insisted during the Cuban Missile Crisis, this is our big opportunity to nuke Moscow. Curtis LeMay was saying, let's nuke Moscow. Head of the Air Force. Kennedy knew not to listen to Curtis LeMay. So the problem we have right now is Trump and Pete Hegseth are Curtis LeMay. We're hearing reports, however, that lawyers and generals inside the Pentagon right now are pushing back, telling Hegseth, we will not destroy civilian infrastructure. Well, they will, and they do. I don't know how many lawyers inside the Pentagon have had this come to Jesus moment, but it's a little late. And if we were a nation of laws, we'd be rounding up the lawyers inside the Pentagon right now and putting them on trial for violating war crime statutes passed here in the United States in the 1990s. They should be tried for the extrajudicial airstrikes over the Caribbean and Eastern Pacific, killing innocent fishermen, lying and saying they're narco-terrorists, doing double taps, going back and killing survivors. So there's this story percolating, but only because we've lost this war, that generals and lawyers in the Pentagon are pushing back against Hegseth and saying, we're not going to commit war crimes. Well, the only reason they're saying that now is they're covering their asses because we lost this war. If we were winning, they would be bombing, which they're doing. They're bombing hospitals. They're bombing health centers in Iran, elementary schools. Now that they're losing, we're hearing stories. Well, I told Hegseth that I'm not going to. So there is talk that some of the people inside Pete Hegseth's Pentagon fear an international day of reckoning. Now, they know in America we would never prosecute war crimes, but the world will. And some people inside the Pentagon are getting scared that they may not be able to leave this country. Some of them are afraid they won't be able to visit Europe. So this is where we are tonight at this moment in time. The ceasefire expires on April 21st. And not since COVID, the last time Trump was president, has the world been this close to completely shutting down. Iran, especially if it goes after the Bab el-Mandab Strait and closes access to the Suez Canal. And remember, this is economic terrorism. All it takes is three mines, one tow missile fired at a ship trying to pass the Bab el-Mandab Strait. Lloyd's of London won't insure any tankers, and the Suez Canal is shut down. Turns out, and all of Europe knew this, people in the Pentagon knew this, they told Trump that Iran has the power to pull the kill switch on the entire global economy. And Trump is going to get the blame, not Iran. We are slouching towards a worldwide economic lockdown. Farmers unable to plant because fertilizer has either become unaffordable or unattainable. It's planting season right now in America. So in the next week, we have until a week from this Tuesday before the ceasefire expires. In the next week, Trump has several moves that he has to make. He can authorize some kind of back-channel negotiations with high-ranking members of the Islamic Republic, not the Speaker of the Parliament, not the guy who showed up in Islamabad. He needs to have someone from his White House talking with the top people inside the Iranian Revolutionary Guard. The problem is they've been killing them all, and all that's left are hardliners who mock Trump, who don't take his calls. And they know he's got to make a deal. So what is the deal? What is a conceivable deal? So remember I talked about the secret deal that Kennedy struck with Khrushchev, removing the Jupiter missiles from Italy and Turkey? I suspect a secret deal to open up Hormuz involves handing over hundreds of billions of dollars to the Iranian people as reparations. And maybe you can launder this money. Lord knows Donald Trump is an expert at that. Maybe somehow it can be called, investments, whatever. But secretly, this country has to get a couple $100 billion to the Iranians. And he's going to have to agree to gently pull away from Israel. He can't do it in broad daylight, but he will seek, if he can negotiate a deal with Iran, he would agree to gradually pull away from Israel and kind of play Israel the way he plays Zelensky. He pretends sometimes that he's rooting for Zelensky. Remember, he announced that Ukraine can win the war, and Putin is, and when he said that, I said he's just playing for time. He's just rope-a-doping for Putin. But I do believe that there's an opportunity here. I don't think Trump would agree to it, where he gives a couple $100 billion to Iran and gradually pulls away from Israel over a period of years, as well as pulling our troops out of the Persian Gulf. That's what he has to do to get Hormuz opened. Can you see him doing that? Question is, what's Iran's price? Trump called it extortion today. He called the closing of Hormuz extortion because they're supposedly forcing you to pay a $2 million toll. But they're going to be asking Donald Trump to pay a $2 trillion toll to get Hormuz open. So the question is, what's Iran's price? There's no military solution to this. There's a financial solution. How much cash? How much does Trump have to pay them so that all the other concessions he has to make, like pulling out of the Persian Gulf and away from Israel, remain secret, or at least imperceptible? How much cash does Trump have to give Iran so they will not draw attention to the fact that they bent him to his knee and he agreed to pull troops out of the Persian Gulf and to disassociate from Israel? And you could do that imperceptibly. You can begin pulling back troops from the Persian Gulf. There's new reporting that most of our barracks in the Persian Gulf are uninhabitable because of Iranian drones. This is another scandal that I don't have time to get into tonight. But we're putting our soldiers up in hotels and apartment buildings because the Iranian drones they destroyed our embassy in Riyadh. We were totally unprepared for this. And we were moving troops closer to Iran, putting them up in like fiberglass huts with no protection from above. It's a scandal that will come out if this war ever ends, how unprepared our military was for this war. So it wouldn't be that difficult to start bringing troops back from the Persian Gulf and turning away from Israel over a 2 to 3 year horizon. Imperceptibly, people wouldn't notice. That is the only way Trump can get Hormuz opened without being humiliated. That's a best case scenario for Trump. Not America, for Trump. Not the world, for Trump. Because all Trump cares about is being able to say, I didn't lose. I'm undefeated. I went eyeball to eyeball with Iran and they blinked. So right now, he and Witkoff and Jared are trying to figure out how much it's going to cost for the Iranians to let Trump say, I went eyeball to eyeball with them and they blinked. So that's the best case scenario for Trump. What would be the best case scenario for everyone else? What would be the best case scenario for America, Israel, Lebanon, the Persian Gulf, Iran, Europe, the planet? What would be best is, and I'm not being glib here, I mean this, what would be best for everyone is removing Trump from the Oval Office. He's insane. He's clearly insane. And the fact that we haven't invoked the 25th Amendment and got him the hell out of there suggests this country is insane. Countries go insane. There's a mass psychosis going on in the United States that we allow this psychotic degenerate to determine war and peace. So he's got to be removed. 25th Amendment. He is psychotic. Does anybody doubt that he's not psychotic? And it's psychotic leaving him there, pretending he's a rational human being. Now, people keep thinking he's going to come to his senses. He has no senses. People keep thinking, oh, he knows he's screwed up. No, he's psychotic. They don't know that they screwed up. People keep thinking the people around Trump will come to their senses, realize who he is, and abandon him. Go public and expose him. They won't. He won't. He's too sick, and so are the people surrounding him. That's why they're in the White House. They're just as sick as he is. Even Marco Rubio knew this war was going to be a disaster. Didn't quit. Susie Wiles, chief of staff, told him this is going to be a disaster. She didn't quit. Dan Kane, chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff, told him not a good idea. Radcliffe, head of the CIA, said not a good idea. Don't do it. J.D. Vance said, don't do it. He did it. They don't quit. If you had a job where your boss was doing 1/1,000,000th of the damage Trump is doing to this planet, would you stay there? Yeah, if you need the money, sure, you'll look the other way. But none of these people need the money. They just want to be in the loop. And I'm telling you, if you haven't seen Armando Iannucci's movie In the Loop, you cannot fully understand why Marco Rubio, General Dan Kane, stay and commit war crimes. They'll stay and commit war crimes just so long as they can stay in the loop. Armando, there's nobody, anyway. Anyway, sorry. So don't think for one second Trump is going to wake up one day and go, my God, what did I do? And drop to his knees. Forgive me, Jesus. Never going to happen. You know, I remember watching January 6th, foolishly believing that Trump and the people around him and his voters, that, they realized what Trump is, as bad as January 6th is, and I'm very sorry for what happened to those 6 police officers, and even Ashley Babbitt. I feel bad for her. I thought, as bad as this is, it will serve as a reminder of who Trump is, and he will never return. I'm going to say something that Donald Trump is incapable of. Boy, was I wrong. Boy, was I wrong. He is never wrong. January 6th, not his fault. Nancy Pelosi's fault. She's supposed to call in the National Guard. No, she's not. Anyway, the last thing Donald Trump said to his staff on January 6th when he walked out of the Oval Office and back up to the family residence, his last words on January 6th to the White House staff was, quote, wow, Mike Pence really let me down today, unquote. That was his takeaway from January 6th, that Mike Pence let him down. So Donald Trump is a psychotic monster. And he's turned this party, he's created a mass psychosis within the Republican Party, and they're completely disconnected from reality. They create their own reality now, and that affects our reality. Their psychoses have real-world consequences. So, for example, while Vance was supposedly negotiating a peace deal Saturday, Trump and his Secretary of State Marco Rubio attended a UFC bout in Miami to present to the world they don't have a care. They went out, public display of, we're going to have some fun tonight, while the world is on the precipice of shutting down. At least Nero knew how to play the fiddle. Trump has no talent whatsoever. At least Nero played the fiddle while Rome burned. So he was asked, are you worried about the deal? And Trump said, you know, whether we make a deal or not doesn't matter. This is what he said, quote, whether we make a deal or not doesn't matter to me because we've won. He's undefeated. He didn't lose to Joe Biden. He won. The ceasefire, according to Donald Trump, means he won. Hormuz being closed doesn't matter. We won. Let me wave the white flag of victory. Never apologize, never concede. Keep lying to the American people until you start to believe those lies are true. And while Trump tells reporters he's keeping a few Iranian leaders alive just so there's somebody around with whom to negotiate a surrender, his own intelligence community is trying to tell him a different story. But he won't listen. Despite Pete Hegseth crowing, we've destroyed 90% of their missiles. New reporting from Reuters and other reliable news organizations. New reporting says Trump's own intelligence community has told him that after dropping 13,000 bombs on Iran, that doesn't include what Israel dropped, after 13,000 bombs on Iran, all those bunker busters, we barely made a dent in their missile supply. We barely made a dent in what they have and what they can manufacture. According to our intelligence agencies, Iran somehow has been able to retain thousands of short and medium-ranged ballistic missiles that can hit Diego Garcia. They came close to hitting Diego Garcia, which means they can hit London. Why haven't we been able to make a dent in their supply of missiles, despite the neo-Nazi defense chief, Pete Hegseth, the white Christian nationalist, whose body is covered with neo-Nazi tattoos, the man who's fathered 5 or 7 children, some out of wedlock. His own mother wrote him a letter saying, "I'm tired of you abusing women." Pete Hegseth, a man who had to pay $50,000 to silence a woman who accused him of rape. What was I talking about? I completely lost my train of thought. I should be working for the White House right now. So why haven't we made a dent in Iran's missiles? Deeply buried in the mountains of Iran, and our intelligence community knows this, there are missile launch complexes. They call them missile cities. Missile cities carved deep into the mountains, tunnels, steel bunkers. Like I keep telling you, the Iranians have been preparing for this since 1979. Their missile launchers are mobile, meaning they can roll them out from the mountain, from a cave, and then fire them, and then roll them right back into the mountain before the Americans can fire at the source of the missile strike. You know, we have AWACS, we have satellites that can see where the missiles came from, but by the time we've responded to that flash of light, they've moved the missile launchers back into the mountain. We don't have enough bunker busters to get them. So, geography is destiny. And it would be nice if we had a president who could read a map. You're looking at the Strait of Hormuz, and above it, nothing but mountains and cliffs. And inside those mountains are thousands and thousands of missiles, suicide drones, short-range missiles. The days of conventional naval warfare are over. Now, we have a big Navy, but we can't send American warships into Hormuz to soften the enemy the way we did on D-Day. Look at that. Look at the strait. How many ships do you think you can fit inside the Strait of Hormuz that can pound the cliffs and the mountains like we did on D-Day? And it's not safe for our warships to be that close to the coast of Iran. It's too close. Interceptors, American interceptors, don't have enough time to calculate the coordinates on a short-range missile strike. They're firing from the mountains. It takes seconds for a missile or a drone, especially when our ships are being swarmed by drones, attack drones, not just from the air, but suicide submersibles. We'd be very busy trying to hold Hormuz. And there's not a single military analyst, no, there isn't a single naval expert who thinks our Navy and Air Force can bombard Hormuz without taking massive casualties and losing expensive warships. Now, I hear Keith Kellogg, our peace envoy, and Lindsey Graham saying there's nothing our military can't do. I agree with that. I think our soldiers, if we had to take Hormuz, we could. How many body bags? How many body bags because Donald Trump is stupid? How many Americans should die because Pete Hegseth and Donald Trump are psychotic? I think, we could do a lot of damage. But I don't think it's worth it. And you got to speak up now before ground troops are sent in, because then it's unpatriotic. Then you're not supporting the troops. They accuse you of not supporting the troops because you don't want them to get hurt. That's the mental gymnastics they play during wartime. So, best case scenario, as the Pope said, call your member of Congress. The Pope said, call your member of Congress now, because Trump's dangerous and he has no problem sending other people's children, fathers, mothers into battle. Okay. So what is the solution? I'm just not going to, I don't just attack here. I have solutions. The best case scenario, the best thing that could be done, that should be done, if somebody like Bernie Sanders or Barack Obama, who inherited a mess from another idiot, another war criminal, George W. Bush. If somebody like Obama came in, like we removed Trump, and now you got to solve his mess. The first thing a good U.S. president would do is say, oops. Of course, Fox knew, it's an apology tour. The president's apologized. We have nothing to apologize for. That's what Obama went around the world before he was sworn in and said something like, America hasn't always acted in the world's best interest. And that became known as his apology tour. And people on Fox were going, we have nothing to apologize for. How dare he apologize? You don't think we have to apologize just for global warming? But who do you think is responsible for Hormuz closed? Donald Trump. So a good president says, I'm sorry, we went a little psychotic here. We elected Donald Trump. I think we can't solve this mess. We created it. We need help. So I'm asking the United Nations, I'm asking Europe, the Persian Gulf, all the states involved, to come in and solve this, to negotiate with Iran, to get Hormuz opened. Now, one of the things a good president could say is, we broke Hormuz. Maybe the world can make a deal with Iran where they can all get get oil that goes through Hormuz. We have our own oil. We're the biggest exporter of liquid natural gas and petroleum. None of the oil that comes out of the Persian Gulf will go to the United States. We'll live on our oil, which was the original idea until Obama became president. Before Before Obama was president, any oil produced in the United States wasn't allowed to be sold on the world market. Did you know that? It was domestic oil. It was for national security. Drill, baby, drill. Remember that? And that was so we'd have unlimited supplies of oil. And then Dick Cheney and Bush went all in on fracking. And it turned out the Permian Basin, we have the largest oil reserves, not like Venezuela, but I think we have more than Saudi Arabia. We don't need, which when Trump says we don't need the world's oil, he's half right. We used to not need the world's oil, but then the oil companies went to Obama and said, we can't make a profit. There's so much oil in the United States that we're selling domestically. The prices are too low, and Obama signed a waiver that allowed American oil to be sold on the international spot market, meaning our gasoline prices, our oil prices are susceptible to the vicissitudes of the world economy, not the American economy, and that's because of Barack Obama. So one of the things we could do to solve this is we screwed up. The world can have all the oil that goes through Hormuz. For the next 10 years, we will live only on American oil. It won't be sold on the international market, which means the effing oil companies go out of business. We nationalize the oil companies and use just enough oil that we need to transition to alternative energy. So that makes sense. That's the answer. That's the righteous thing to do. That would benefit everybody. It would prevent mass starvation. People are going to start starving if Hormuz doesn't open. It would allow America to display a little humility, and it would put the oil companies out of business. That's what we should do. We're not going to do that. Remember, drill, baby, drill. The thing people don't know is oil companies don't want to drill, and energy independence doesn't exist because Obama signed a waiver allowing oil companies to sell petroleum on the world market. So the price of oil is determined by the world economy and OPEC turning the spigot on and off. Has nothing to do, because of Obama, we don't have any control over the price of oil because the oil companies want to be able to charge more for oil. And if they're only selling to America, there isn't enough demand. And you start in Venezuela, before we attacked, I think the price of a gallon of gas before the subsidies were I think it was 50 cents a gallon in Venezuela. I think it was 18 cents a gallon. Okay. Well, that's what we should do. That's the best case scenario. Short of that, we're looking at two other scenarios. And these, I think, are real. A ceasefire that extends beyond a week from Tuesday, drags on into the summer. And Hormuz remains closed, and there's intermittent fighting while the world economy is literally brought to its knees. By some estimates, the UN says if Hormuz doesn't open by June, 45 million people living in the sub-Saharan and Asia will starve to death, in addition to the nearly 1 billion people on the planet who are experiencing famine. So that's what Trump has on his tiny hands. A lot of blood for such tiny hands. there will be, by the way, if Hormuz doesn't open in the Philippines, I believe, have like 3 more weeks of gasoline. There will be a massive social unrest globally and here at home, which is what Trump wants. He tried to trigger social unrest in Minnesota, and Governor Walz said, don't give him what he wants. Governor Walz said, just don't, and we didn't. But if this economy starts heading where I think it's heading, there might be enough social unrest, or at least enough fear of social unrest, that he will feel he can get away with sending in the troops and doing what he's wanted to do since he got sworn back into office, and that is invoke the Insurrection Act, because he's looking for any reason to cancel November's midterms. Now, I hear people say, and I hear myself say, he wouldn't dare. That's a bridge too far. Even the Republicans wouldn't stand for him canceling the elections. We've never canceled American elections. Well, we never had a problem transitioning from one president to the next until Trump came along. Remember January 6th? The American people, at least some, will stand for his invoking the Insurrection Act and either canceling the elections or doing what Viktor Orbán did up until it was a landslide and it didn't work, and that is have, voter intimidation, seizing ballot boxes. So that's one option. The third, and unfortunately, and I hope I'm wrong, but I think this is the likely scenario, is the ceasefire expires a week from this Tuesday, and Trump fires up the war machine and commits ground troops to seize Iran's Karg Island, which produces 90% of that country's oil, and he sends in troops to take the beaches of Hormuz. It's going to be a bloodbath for everybody, including us, but we'll be told it's worth it. The Pope said, call your member of Congress, Pope Leo. Pentagon does not like the Pope because the Pentagon doesn't like Catholics. They had a Protestants-only Mass at the Pentagon, and they canceled the Catholic Mass. The Guardian has a whole series about Pete Hegseth's religious beliefs and the pastors he prays with who believe the Catholic Mass should be outlawed, who believe Islam is not compatible with Western civilization and that Muslims should not be allowed to hold elective office or work in our government. Okay? The Pope, who is very consistent, he's against abortion, not too keen on peace, consistently calls for peace. Pope Leo, you thought you loved Pope Francis. Pope Leo is saying, listen to your Pope. Listen to your Pope. My sister said, if I weren't already in a relationship, I'd marry him. She doesn't really, she's not too smart, my sister. She said, I want to marry the Pope, but I can't leave who I'm with. She's not too smart, my sister. Okay. Call your congressman, congresswoman. Because once he commits ground troops, it becomes politically inexpedient for politicians to defund the war. So you got to get your member of Congress on board before he sends in troops. So this is what Trump posted Sunday. Effective immediately. These are the words of our psychotic president. Effective immediately, the United States Navy, the finest in the world, will begin the process of blockading any and all ships trying to enter or leave the Strait of Hormuz. So he says he's going to blockade Hormuz. Now, so that means he's not going to go into the strait, but he's going to stop. Well, here he goes. He says, I have also instructed our Navy to seek and interdict every vessel in international waters that has paid a toll to Iran. No one who pays an illegal toll will have safe passage on the high seas, unquote. We are in crazy town. So now the Navy, which can't stop a narco-terrorist to find out if they have drugs on board, is going to start stopping tankers and let me see your papers. Did you pay a toll? Prove that you didn't pay a toll. This is what our Navy is going to be doing. This is crazy town. This man is psychotic. And we're psychotic for not invoking the 25th Amendment. At some point, you have to stop blaming Trump. At some point, there's collective guilt. At some point, you have to blame the American people, the Supreme Court, the Republicans, the media, for not referring to Trump all the time as psychotic. Our psychotic president today, Donald Trump, you have to start referring to Donald Trump as psychotic. And this country is psychotic. The world is watching us. They're not rooting for America. They're not. Because of Donald Trump. Sunday, he went on Maria Bartiromo's show, speaking of psychotics. I'm not saying she's psychotic. I'm just saying, speaking of psychotics, I wouldn't dare call Maria Bartiromo. I wouldn't say she's psychotic. That would be unfair. I don't know if she's psychotic. How would I know? I mean, that's what people are saying, but I don't know. I hope she's not. I don't think she is. But why am I saying she appears psychotic if she's not psychotic? I mean, I constantly hear myself saying, she seems kind of psychotic to me. Why would I be thinking that if she weren't a bit psychotic? But I don't think she's psychotic, and I hope she's not. He appeared on her show, and she's very talented, very well-read, very brilliant. And he went on Fox News and said, quote, we are locked and loaded, and I'm ready to resume blowing Iran to smithereens. We're locked and loaded, and I could take out Iran in one day. Because, he could. When he served in Vietnam, he learned things serving in the shit. He was there. He saw things in Da Nang. He alone, just from what he learned serving our nation in Vietnam, he said, I could take out Iran in one day. He said, the U.S., we can destroy Iran's entire energy infrastructure, electric generating plants, and more if needed. He said, the Iranians who fire at U.S. forces will be blown to hell. Well, again, according to the Geneva Conventions, That talk is not protected speech. A world leader cannot threaten, let alone actually commit war crimes. If we were a nation of laws, and obviously we're not because this psychotic is back in the Oval Office, he would be frog-marched before our own judges committing war crimes based on statutes passed in the 1990s in the United States. I'm not talking about the International Criminal Court. I'm not talking about the UN or the Hague. I'm talking about American laws. This is the Mop-Up. I'm David Feldman in New York City. One of Donald Trump's enemies, California House Democrat and candidate for governor Eric, by the way, now it gets really good. Now I got some stuff on Kristi Noem's husband. If you stuck with me, now the good stuff comes. I got stuff on Kristi Noem's husband that is so good, and I'm saving it for last because it's so good. I feel very bad for him. It's very sad what's happened to Kristi Noem. They're good people. So one of Donald Trump, let me get through some other stuff here. One of Donald Trump's enemies, California House Democrat and candidate for governor, Eric Swalwell, he is currently suing Donald Trump in civil court for damages incurred on January 6. Congressman Eric Swalwell, done. The Manhattan District Attorney's Office, the same people who convicted Donald Trump, Bragg's office, they announced that Congressman Eric Swalwell is under investigation for sexual assault, rape. Swalwell's political obituary was written incredibly quickly, in a matter of 48 hours. I haven't seen somebody unravel as quickly as Swalwell has. This happened incredibly fast. Several of his staffers accusing him of rape. The Manhattan District Attorney reportedly looking into an accusation made by one of Swalwell's staffers who said he raped her 2 years ago inside a New York City hotel room after they had attended an award ceremony. Two other women now claiming Swalwell sent them unsolicited pictures of his Anthony Weiner. Not sure how much longer Swalwell has before he's going to have to resign from Congress. High-ranking senior staffers inside Swalwell's congressional office, as well as campaign for governor, signed a letter saying they stand with his accusers. As I said, Swalwell is currently seeking the Democratic nomination for governor of California. House Minority Leader Hakeem Jeffries said it's time for Swalwell to drop out of the race for governor. That is the first step towards Jeffries telling Swalwell to leave Congress. California Democratic Congressman Jimmy Gomez immediately quit as co-chair of Swalwell's campaign for governor and said it's time for Swalwell to drop out of the race. Former California House Democrat Katie Porter, who's been on this show, she is running for the Democratic nomination for governor of California against Swalwell. She urged Swalwell to resign from Congress. The speed of Swalwell's downfall is staggering. Did any of you? We're just getting ready for Monday, the weekend. It all happened at the end of last week. Within hours, the California Teachers Association took back their much coveted endorsement, as did the Service Employees International Union, which not only rescinded their endorsement of Swalwell, but urged him to drop out. The California Firefighters Union took back their endorsement, urged him to drop out. There was a key fundraiser, important one, scheduled in the leafy neighborhood of Brentwood. That's in Los Angeles. That was immediately canceled. You don't want, when leafy Brentwood is canceling your fundraisers, you're done. Act Blue, the Democratic fundraising site, removed Swalwell's page. They will no longer be taking donations for Swalwell. Florida House Republican Anna Paulina Luna said if Swalwell doesn't quit Congress, she will introduce a motion to have him expelled. George Santos. I mean, the Republicans, to their credit, removed George Santos. So with Republicans holding a 3-seat majority right now, but it's smaller than that, depending on who's in D.C., that majority could be a 1 to 2 vote majority. Republicans obviously want Swalwell gone. That's why we are hearing rumblings that if Republicans make a move to expel Swalwell, Democrats will demand quid pro quo by calling for the removal of Texas House Republican Tony Gonzalez, who is accused of having an inappropriate affair with a campaign staffer who ended up killing herself. And he was texting her and sending things. And Gonzalez was in a tight primary runoff against a far-right extremist and AK-47 guy. This is the district that represents Uvalde, by the way. And Gonzalez, a month ago, dropped out of the race. He's not participating in the runoff. He's planning to remain in Congress until January 3rd, 2027, when the new House is sworn in, and he will most likely be replaced by another Paul Gosar. We're going to have another Paul Gosar in Congress. Mark Carney is leader of Canada's Liberal Party and has been serving as Prime Minister since March of 2025. Liberals are in charge, but they don't have a clear majority in the House of Commons. They're about 3 seats shy, and that could change Monday when voters in Toronto and part of Quebec go to the polls for a mini election to fill 3 seats. And early polling shows the Liberal Party could run the tables on all 3, giving them an actual majority in the House of Commons. So it's election season and the dirt is coming out, and this is really bad. It's now being reported that Canadian Prime Minister Mark Carney spent $524,815 of taxpayer money on plain food during his first year in office. I mean, he's not flying Delta. I mean, I know food gets expensive, especially at the airport, but this is a private catering bill for just 28 flights for the Prime Minister between March of last year and February of 2026. This is unbelievable. When the Prime Minister of Canada flew to Washington to meet with Donald Trump for the first time back in early 2025, the catering bill for his 2-hour flight came to more than $21,000. In his defense, he's also a rapper. He reportedly charged taxpayers nearly $160,000 for the catering on 2 flights, one to the UAE and the other to Johannesburg. What are you eating? Adrenochrome? I mean, is this stuff that's been pulled from the basement of Comet Pizza? I mean, what costs what meal? How big is your posse? On his flight to London to meet with British Prime Minister Keir Starmer, the catering bill came to more than $60,000 on one flight. One trip to London, $60,000. He spent close to $94,000 on drinks and food flying to the Vatican to attend Pope Leo's inaugural Mass, because that's what Jesus would spend. The Canadian Taxpayers Association said that Carney spent more on catering, his in-flight meals, than the average Canadian family will spend on groceries over the next 30 years. By the way, this is the Liberal Party. This is the party of the people. The food price report said to feed a family of 4 in Canada, it comes close to $17,571 a year. Wow. Canadian Prime Minister Mark Carney, in 1 year, spent $524,815 total of taxpayers' money on catering for his flights. Americans, we would never tolerate that kind of disregard for the public treasury from our leaders. We would never. That's the difference between Canada and the United States. We expect more from our leaders. Kamala Harris says she's seriously thinking of running for president in 2028. During an interview with the Reverend Al Sharpton at the National Action Network convention, Harris said, I might run. She was asked, are you thinking? She says, I might. And that drew cheers from the audience, who received her much more affectionately than they did Governor Josh Shapiro and J.B. Pritzker, Governor Pritzker. They are also, like Harris, eyeing a 2028 presidential run. During her interview with Al Sharpton, Harris said black voters shouldn't take their strength for granted. She said they needed to trade their votes for tangible promises from candidates. She urged black voters to be, quote, transactional, as in, you want my vote? What's in it for me? Well, I agree. And what was in it for black voters when Kamala Harris was running for president in 2024? I agree. Voting should be transactional. You want my vote? What's in it for me? If all voters did that, we'd have Medicare for all, free tuition at all public universities, and the minimum wage wouldn't be sitting at $7.25 an hour. What are you going to do for me? So, Kamala, if you're going to run for president, get transactional. What's in it, not just for black voters, but for voters? I didn't hear you offering me anything. You were offering me affordability. Affordability. Because of her name recognition, Harris is leading in the polls when it comes to 2028 Democratic presidential contenders. But that's always the case. Most voters don't know who else is running. Now, I voted for her. I would vote for her again. But she ran for president in 2024, didn't win a single. Oh, I'm sorry. She ran for president. She tried to get the nomination in 2020. Remember? So did Eric Swalwell, by the way. And she ran for president in 2020, did not win a single primary because she ended up dropping out before the Iowa caucuses. And in 2024, she lost all the swing states that Joe Biden carried in 2020. She's not Hillary. Hillary won in 2016. At least she won the popular vote. So she had a right to ask for a second chance. So did Al Gore. Al Gore won the popular vote in the year 2000. Gore and Hillary didn't ask for a second chance. I don't think Kamala Harris didn't do good enough to justify not making room for somebody else. Hillary reportedly is sniffing around New Hampshire. I don't know if she's going to run. Harris has scheduled speaking engagements in South Carolina, North Carolina, Georgia, and Arkansas. She's testing the waters. The race for president of the United States begins Wednesday, November 4th, 2026, the day after the midterms. Megyn Kelly said on her satellite radio show that Kristi Noem's husband, Byron Noem, has checked himself into a Christian sex rehab clinic to overcome an addiction to bimbofication, a fetish in which men are attracted to women who alter their bodies by pumping massive amounts of saline into their breasts until they become freakishly large. They do this in order to become, quote unquote, a bimbo, looking and acting like a ditzy airhead woman prized solely for her appearance. This is an actual fetish, bimbo fetish. Reporting in the Daily Mail confirms, this was confirmed by Byron Noem himself, that he has paid tens of thousands of dollars to online bimbo models, and he too bimbofies himself, posing online as a crossdresser in pink hot pants, and he stuffs enormous balloons into his shirt to suggest gigantic breasts. He ties the balloon knots so that they look like nipples. These are very healthy people. Kristi Noem, very healthy, good people. The Daily Mail out with new reports that Byron Noem had an on and off again relationship with a left-wing bimbo dominatrix over the course of 9 years. The left-wing bimbo dominatrix injected her breasts with massive amounts of saline, but while she looked like a bimbo, she dominated, she said, Byron Noem, so he would not only worship her, but play the part of the bimbo. According to the Daily Mail, Byron Noem's dominatrix was a sex worker who went under the name Shai Sotomayor, I guess named after Supreme Court Justice. She is left-wing. Her real name is Raylene Riley. Her saline breast implants are 2,500 cubic centimeters each, or roughly two-thirds of a gallon. Two-thirds of a gallon. Two-thirds of a gallon each. So both breasts are 1.3 gallons. Sotomayor said, those are udders. Why don't you just, okay. Sotomayor, she's the left-wing dominatrix who Byron Noem fell in love with, said, I want to leave my wife for you. Wait, gets better. Sotomayor said she first began getting paid by Byron Noem. That would be Kristi Noem's husband. She was getting paid by Byron Noem back in 2016. And then it became on and off again when Kristi Noem became governor. He said, I got to get myself right with God. And then he'd come back to her. Over the years, he told her, this would be Kristi Noem's husband, told left-wing dominatrix and bimbo, Shai Sotomayor, Byron Noem told her he was a transgender man who wanted to transition and change his name to Crystal. Text messages turned over to the Daily Mail show Kristi Noem's husband writing to Shai Sotomayor, a left-wing bimbo dominatrix, quote, he's talking about how he wants to transition to become a woman, quote, I want to be a crystal so bad. I want to be a woman so bad, unquote. As a dominatrix, Shai Sotomayor, who's left-wing, said she would often get Kristi Noem's husband to disparage the former head of Homeland Security. She would get Byron Noem to talk about how ugly Kristi Noem is and how much he hates her. And this was going on up until last month. Sotomayor this year began disciplining Byron Noem, for his wife's behavior as head of Homeland Security after the killings of Alex Preddy and Renee Good in Minneapolis. She got him to admit that he is married to a monster. And she got him to talk about cricket. There's some texts where he says, well, you don't understand. He kind of, when he went into, so anyway, so there's new reporting that he entered a program, Byron Noem entered a program for Christian men back in January to cure his addiction and to work on his transgender cross-dressing issues. He was supposed to stay at this Christian rehab center for 40 days, and then he would be cured. But he bailed. He left early this year. Last month, when he came out of this Christian rehab center for sexual transgressions, he immediately went back to OnlyFans and told a bimbo fetish model that he was in love with her. He offered this online model tens of thousands of dollars so she could drastically enlarge her breasts. Noem, according to the Daily Mail, spent tens of thousands of dollars on these models, at one time telling the left-wing bimbo dominatrix he wanted to leave his wife for her. So he went into Christian rehab at the beginning of the year, but he bailed early. Noem is reportedly back inside a Christian rehab program that cures men of their addictions to pornography, sex, bimbofication, or wanting to transition to a woman. And it only takes 40 days. He quit earlier this year. Had he stuck it out, if he, pardon the pun, had he just stayed for 40 days, he would have been cured. Now, according to Megyn Kelly, he's back in Christian rehab. And Byron, you're not hurting anybody. You're not. So if you're watching, give it 40 days. That's what worked for me. You can cure this. You just need to pray it away. Pray, ask God, who created you this way, say, you goofed, God. God, are you listening? You made me wrong. You effed up. Now change it. Toot sweet. Now. And it worked. That's what happened. I went to Christian rehab, and it cured me of all my sexual transgressions and taught me some new ones. Wow. Just pray it away. Yeah, this shit should be outlawed. And I believe the Supreme Court just ruled that it's protected by free speech, that you can, there were laws outlawing, this is, I don't mean to be, I'm being serious here. This is why people commit suicide. And I worry for Kristi Noem's, in all seriousness, as much as I like to see Kristi Noem suffer, her husband is in crisis. He's not hurting anybody. He really isn't. He just married a monster, and he's surrounded by monsters who can't help him. God made you the way you are, and you need to love yourself for the way you are, and the way you need to love yourself for the way you love. There isn't enough love or sex on this planet. And guys dressing up with balloons under their chest and relieving their sexual tension, greatest thing you can, seriously, because it's sure better than what Pete Hegseth does, paying a woman $50,000 to make the rape allegation go away and getting a hard-on at the thought of killing Muslims. So Byron Noem never hurt. As far as I know, he didn't hurt anybody. Unlike his wife, Kristi Noem, who will rot in hell. She will rot in hell. And I have no doubt that Kristi Noem, Homan, Stephen Miller, not only will rot in hell, they already are. And you see this with Kristi Noem's marriage. What a hellish existence, being married to a man who is clearly in pain, and you can't help him. You give him bad advice, like Christian rehab. I'm David Feldman, reminding you to stay strong and protect the weak. Call your members of Congress. Obey the Pope. Do you love the Pope? Love your Pope. Call your member, do what the Pope says. Call your member of Congress and say no ground troops. None. Thank you for listening. Sorry I went long again. I don't know what's happening. My next show will be Tuesday night at 6:05 p.m. I'm trying to keep a schedule for my own mental health. So next show, 6:05 p.m. Eastern on Tuesday night, and then after that, Thursday night, 6:05 p.m. Eastern. I'm going to try to keep a schedule. It's unfair to my listeners to expect them, or Mila and Bob in the chat room, to be like, firefighters waiting for the bell to ring. So I'm going to try to be consistent. Thank you to Bob and Mila in the chat room. I covered a lot of material tonight. If I made any mistakes, please correct me in the chat, in the comment section. Hit the like button, please, so I remain in your feed. That's the best way. Subscribe to this channel. Hit the notification bell, please. That way you'll be told when this garbage is about to start. And subscribe to my newsletter. Call your member of Congress. Listen to the Ralph Nader Radio Hour. Listen to whatever Ralph Nader tells you to do. Go to Down with Tyranny and read Howie Klein. Okay, sorry I went so long. I'm not well. I'm not. What can I tell you? I'm not well. So I'm sorry. I'm sick in the head. I need to go back to Christian rehab.